walking, biking, public transit. Welcome to another episode of On Transit. In this episode of On Transit, we look at the role that transit is playing in revitalizing the Bronzeville area of Chicago, a historic African-American neighborhood served by two major L lines, and which also includes the Illinois Institute of Technology and White Sox Field. In early November, I attended the Railvolution conference in Chicago. Railvolution is an annual conference dedicated to building livable communities through transit. Railvolution featured several mobile workshops, which gave conference attendees a chance to ride transit to learn about it and its impact on communities. I attended two mobile workshops. The second mobile workshop I attended was called Get on the Green Line to Historic Bronzeville. Bronzeville, the Black metropolis, was historically the only area of Chicago in which African Americans could buy property. In 1948, when those restrictive covenants were broken, many of the city's middle and upper class blacks left the area, and much of the historic housing was replaced by towers of public housing. Now that most of that concentrated public housing has been demolished, residents are revitalizing the area and building economic opportunities based on technology and history. The technology comes from the Mies van der Rohe designed campus of the Illinois Institute of Technology. The history comes from the cultural ferment that was the Black metropolis, the concentration of activity in literature and music for which South Chicago is known around the world.
And IIT is one of our largest employers. So when we first started hearing that there was a threat of IIT leaving the community, some of that was based on crime and other issues, but one of the issues was wanting to get away from the noise pollution of this train.
This is Randolph and Wabash.
And so the community really rallied
Shore trains at Randolph
to
and
try
Wabash.
to find a solution.
This is a Green Line train to 63rd and Ashland.
And we did so, and you're going to see that today. It's very famous now. It's what we call the Exelon Tunnel. The other victory was actually renaming that station to Bronzeville IIT. So that we actually got in our development efforts a station called Bronzeville, so that when tourists like yourself, visitors are here, and we say come to Bronzeville, we can actually say just get on the Green Line and get off at Bronzeville. What we're getting ready to pass on the left is a recent fire loss of a Sullivan building. As a matter of fact, last week there was a fire in two existing Sullivan Adler buildings. This one, unfortunately, someone was in the basement trying to dismantle a boiler, and the building caught on fire. As you see, they're still spraying.
This is all new South Loop development. So a lot of this development is being developed over old rail yards, old rail lines that are no longer used. And this is also parallel to where the metro trains run that take us out into Indiana. See this bridge overhead? Look over here.
Oh yeah.
That bridge takes the orange line southwest.
One of the things about Bronzeville is that it had the highest concentration of public housing in one community anywhere in the world. We've had a lot of challenges in terms of just wanting to create more mixed income communities. This is another public housing development. That's one that we think will be able to make the transition in terms of being rehabbed and saved. But most people who've been to Chicago know the State Street corridor, where it was basically a whole corridor of public housing from 63rd Street all the way downtown. And basically, if you haven't been to Chicago, that is gone. In terms of our redevelopment boundaries, we say that Bronzeville is 22nd Street to 67th from the lake to the Dan Ryan. This is the Exelon Tube, and this is where we're going to be getting off. We're looking right now at some of the Mies van der Rohe buildings that Cheryl talked about. Most of IIT is designed by Mies, and so at the Welcome Center there, they've just done a new Mies walking tour.
This is 35th Bronzeville IIT.
What are those? These are the dorms right here.
I'm the director of the Mies van der Rohe Society. I'm Justine Gentis, and Mies van der Rohe designed this campus. around 1940 and eventually built 18 buildings here. In the mid-90s, when IIT decided to rededicate itself to this campus and to the neighborhood and stay here, the biggest challenge was to figure out how to use the land underneath the train tracks and how to make this livable space and usable space and workable space. So we built 2 new buildings that both opened in 2003. One is the campus center that is down there where you see this big tube that wraps around the train tracks. But here what you're seeing is the other new building designed by Helmut Jahn. One of the reasons he got the commission for this is he was one of the finalists in the competition for the campus center. And when he didn't get that winning bid on the competition, IIT had been so impressed with the way that he thought about how to muffle noise that we hired him to do this dormitory. And so this houses 360 students. All undergraduate classes and graduate students are mixed in here. And he runs this concrete and glass curtain wall across the back of the building, which basically absorbs all of the noise and all of the vibration from the train, so that students can be living essentially right on the other side of this wall. You'll see the way that he also manages to build these wonderful courtyards to make the building really a passageway from the parking lots on this side to the rest of the campus on the other side, while still managing to muffle the sound. So it stuns me that it only takes that much of that curtain wall to essentially cut them off from the noise of the train.
Is that a particular kind of glass?
No, it's actually 3 panes of glass, and they all reverberate at a slightly different frequency, so it really absorbs it all right into it. The other great thing about him building this on these courtyard models with those pass-throughs is that every single student in the building, no matter where their room is, has at least one wall of floor-to-ceiling windows looking out on a green space. All of these architects wanted to sort of be here on this really important campus to have this sort of dialogue with these mandarins. Rem Koolhaas won the competition. He's a Dutch architect. He was the only architect of that whole group of 38 that saw an opportunity to use the whole landmass that he was given. So here, they said, here's your whole lot that you could use. And he was the only one who said, great, I'll just make it a 1-story building and sort of smash it down underneath the train and spread it out on all sides. The train is this marvelous kind of design element, right? Let's just wrap it all up into one thing. So here you go. Through the middle of the campus, that noise that we just had in this one little space was what was this whole campus. So these 2 buildings not only made it usable space underneath, but they really changed it for the whole campus. So that even in those dormitories over there, the sound that they have from the train is so muffled.
Oh, he wrapped it so that it helped them too.
Right. And then there's a hole at the top that also helps to release much of the noise. The other reason that he got the commission was not only did he see this opportunity to come right under the train, but he also studied how our students were walking across the campus. So they were coming from where they live on this side of the campus to where they work and study on this side of the campus. And he basically lays out the whole building on these long diagonal walkways that they were using anyway, and now he's just built a building around those walkways. The other thing that's very smart is that even on this enormous building, at any point, wherever you're standing, you can see all the way to the other end of the building. And so it makes it very sort of non-hierarchical, right? And he always lets you see the train. So you can see the tube that wraps the train looking out through this little window. And then here you can just see where instead of even covering up the bottom end of the tube that wraps the train, he just leaves it exposed and makes that corrugated steel part of the whole reflection and kind of design of the building. It has the dean of students and the director of housing and all those things for the students. But then it also has a coffee bar for everyone, the campus bookstore, our campus tour program, all of those things wrapped up into this building. Here is an old Mies building that was the original campus cafeteria, opened in 1955. But what was great about this design that Koolhaas did was that even though it annoyed the preservationists no end, that this brand new radical kind of structure was going to wrap around this old Mies building, and even more so that it was going to dig out and expose the foundation of the building. The good news was that we did a full restoration of the building, and we reopened it as the campus cafeteria. What was Mies van der Rohe doing here, and why do people come from all over the world to see this, not just architects? What you have to think back to, go back in your minds to what 1937, 1938. So Mies has come from Europe, and he's been hired by IIT to take over the architecture school, but he also has been given the commission to design and build this whole campus. And he wants to, with not very much money, because IIT has never had very much money, and with hardly any materials because it was the Second World War, he needs to come up with a way to express technology. He needs to be able to say what is modern, what is new, what is technology, how do I use new engineering principles, what is this university about? And these buildings at that time, even though to us now they look sort of drab and plain and even sort of stark, at that time it was a great way to illustrate those things, right? This did say to people, when you have this whole campus that looks like this was about sort of streamlining and new technology and engineering. And then over the course of these buildings that he did on the campus, so over the course of 17 buildings here, he basically is figuring out how to take out all of the bricks. So that by the time he does Crown Hall in 1956, everyone has more money, there's a whole lot more materials available, and he's figured out by doing all of these other buildings here and elsewhere in the world how to get rid of all the bricks. So now you've got a huge glass and steel structure that has no interior supports at all. So every single thing that you all know about office towers now, that you know about open plan offices, that you know about loft living, all started with this building. So the moment in 1956 when Mies on this kind of a scale could do nothing but glass and steel with nothing interior that supports that whole huge space, and all of it inside is flexible to keep moving it around and use it however you want, is everything that to us is so commonplace right now. So this is still home to our College of Architecture, and the remarkable thing is it all still works exactly the same way that it did 50 years ago. We haven't changed a thing about the interior.
Welcome to the University Technology Park at IIT, and I consider this park, and I'm a great believer in transit-oriented development. You should just know that while maybe a lot of the world doesn't know, my whole thought and vision for this park is based on transit-oriented development. The premier, the lead building of the technology park is called Technology Business Center. That building 8 months ago was an empty lab building left over from 1959, and we're putting $45 million into it, transform it to a Class A space for technology companies, build to suit. The designer came up and the developer came up with the idea of actually transforming the inside building by doing this. This is one of these buildings that's designed to bring technology companies back in the city because people want to live in the city. And basically with the red line and the green line servicing this campus, you can basically live just about anywhere in the city and get here by the L's.
We wanted to make a stop at Kaminsky Park, which is U.S. Cellular Field. When we talk about on the north side where you have the Cubs Stadium, after those games let out, the community enjoys all of the commercial spill out of people staying in the neighborhood for dinner, going to the bars, the restaurants, all of those. When the White Sox won the championship last year, the mayor was here and he says, "What is going on with Bronzeville? Why aren't you all, like bustling on 35th Street?" So what you're seeing is mixed income living, condos. There is going to be retail frontage on these sides here. And so this is just being cleared as we speak. This is the first stage, and the building that's left standing, there were probably about 15 of those for Stateway and another 20 so further down called Robert Taylor. So when you were on the express saw was a wall of public housing concentration.
The city of Chicago was redoing all the bridges over the Dan Ryan. I was looking out of my window one day and I said, those sidewalks are a bit too narrow. Fortunately, the gentleman in charge of bridges for the city of Chicago was an IIT alum. I got my way into a meeting where they were planning the White Sox Chicago Cubs game, introduced myself and said, we ought to rethink how we're going to do this bridge and not just make it another bridge like all the others along the Dan Ryan. And the result was a partnership with the White Sox, City of Chicago, and Illinois Institute of Technology for a decorative bridge, and also the public art that is there now.
The community and the college are working with the White Sox and the ball field to create a business district around the ballpark. Our tour of the field included a look at the park's press conference room, which is also used for community meetings. We also got a chance to walk onto the field.
When we renamed the station and decided that we were going to keep IIT was going to stay, so it renamed to 35th Street IIT, the community had a planning charrette to try to figure out how to enhance that.
We all sat around and discuss different ideas that we wanted for the particular mural. These were very talented people, and they came out of the graffiti tagging group here in Chicago when the CTA had a contest for the taggers, and they were two of the best of that entire group. There's a misconception about doing spray painted art leading to graffiti. Actually, it works the other way around. You can take graffiti artists and get them to do something real significant if you give them some direction.
The Black Metropolis Historic District is what we're going to start focusing on at this point, and we have several buildings that make up that district, as well as the fact that there are several historic districts within the Bronzeville area. Almost 37% of the city's historic sites are in Bronzeville. That armory was something that the community built through public bond process for the black soldiers who fought in World War I. So it is on the National Register of Historic Places. Interesting enough, this hardware store right here on your right, this Ace Hardware, was formerly the Sunset Cafe. We had some guys from Japan on the tour who knew all about the Sunset Cafe. And we said, well, it's a hardware store now. But they said, we've got to go in there. So they went in, and the owner was showing them how on the back wall you can still see this original mural of when it was having the band dances.
You guys are on the south side of Chicago.
This is Harold Lucas, and he's the president and CEO of the Black Metropolis Convention Tourism Council. And they have their offices here in this building. This is also where I work, and I'm with the Bronzeville Community Development Partnership. So we have our offices there, as well as housing this new Visitor Information Center. So we are part of the Chicago Boulevard system. Many of you know about the Boulevard system that was designed by Daniel Burnham and actually feeds into the central business area. Harold has been involved in the effort to restore the Black Metropolis Historic District. The Supreme Life Building is one of those buildings, and one of the things that they are looking at with the tourism initiative is this being an economic development driver, because we know that heritage tourism development is one of the fastest growing segments, this cultural heritage tourism segment.
What you're looking at is about half of the Black Belt as we look here. The I-55 overpass is right here. You are currently right at this spot. And so the Victory Monument is the primary statue erected in 1932 for the blacks that served in the First World War.
And this statue was donated from the French. It was actually dedicated from the French to this community for the African American soldiers who fought in World War I. For years, this was the only statue in the country for African American soldiers, but the French had never seen that kind of bravery where the 370th and the 369th from the other regiment from New York held the line so long, and not really understanding that so much of what they were doing was trying to prove that they were men in this country.
We were also the literary capital of the world for African Americans. We had a series of newspapers, the Broadax, the Bee, the Defender. We had great speakers, High Brown Cosmetics. We had our own cosmetics lines, Entertainment, Nat Cole, the Savoy Ballroom Club, Delisa. All of these clubs now, most of them are gone. As we look down here, you see the music, the gospel music, the blues music, and it comes all the way down to the migration experience and the Pullman Porter experience. In other words, as we migrated to the north, the Pullman Porters took the news of you could find the streets were paved in gold in Chicago. You could come up here and get 2 jobs. We're here. Now we've been held in bondage and caught in this restricted area. Now the area is being redeveloped. So the process of gentrification is coming in. We have no alternative but to create wealth and economic empowerment for low-income people, because the real estate values are not going down. They're going to continue to rise. So if we don't get affordable housing and the ability to create jobs in growth industries and focus our young people on those industries, we're going to fail our own community and be re-gentrified out of here, and the culture won't mean anything to anybody. So we have the most illustrious culture and history in blues, jazz, and gospel of anywhere in the world, and we're very proud of that fact.
We want you to recognize that this gateway here was done through transportation dollars, and we have 91 plaques that go up and down both sides of the street with decorative benches.
We spent a lot of years saving this building, which is the anchor to the Gateway, the Supreme Life Insurance Company building, which was an African-American insurance company that was formed in 1925 when they purchased the building and existed through to about 1990 when we were able to forge a partnership, bring it back, create a visitor information center, which you're going to see now, and it's mixed with retail, and it also has 5 townhomes on it. Our goal is to create products and service to sell to the upscale gentry moving in and the international traveler interested in the authentic experience of blues, jazz, and gospel in Chicago, and us being able to put a digital infrastructure in place to market that product to the world.
What we needed to do was to convince the black middle class that was moving out to the suburbs, and the issues that you talk about with sprawl and whatever, is that you really need to save grandmother's house. You need to come back and recognize that your equity is right here on King Drive, and that it's full of history. So because of the real estate restrictive covenants which kept us as this kind of city within a city, as soon as those covenants were lifted, the community's focus was to move out and be able to live where you could. Again, that same density is what created a lot of our creative dynamic product in terms of jazz, blues, gospel. Our newest project is working on a designation of a National Heritage Area project. The community capacity building, though, is certainly our biggest challenge. We're looking at opportunities for a lot of social venture enterprises, so that as we bring on these different things in tourism and develop tourist product and services, that we really identify how to parallel jobs with that. We try to use technology as a tool for that kind of civic engagement over the internet, where it's hard to get people to go to meetings, it's hard to fill a room, but the web portal, which I hope you'll visit, bronzevilleonline.com, has been a great resource for us. So the Supreme Liberty Life Center is where we are today. We're happy that we were able to halt the demolition of this building. We're really starting to look now at this 35th Street corridor, as Harold said, for Main Street, recognizing the kind of transportation we have. We're starting to see the economic development. The plan for the corridor is transportation, technology, and tourism. So we really can talk technology with that tech center coming in, but we also negotiated with them a community benefits agreement so that we would be able to develop the kinds of things that we do with the digital divide issues here in the community.
One of the keys to our success and continued success is an ability to understand and work with people that you work with, and I don't want to say like-minded, but similarly minded. People that have a commitment to change and want to do something. That's what's made, I think, our work so successful, having such diverse kind of successes over an extended period of time. It's an ability to understand who your true allies are, who's thinking the same way, and stick with those folks.
The interesting thing about this community is where other communities are clamoring for transportation options because they want to use transportation as an economic development tool. This community already has the transportation, so now it's a matter of making it more of a destination, not only for visitors to Chicago, but for folks who live in Chicago. Well, one of the critical pieces of this going forward with your project is to really get a good sense of what the community wants out of that project and to have an organization that can articulate what that vision is and shepherd that project. We always talk about gentrification, and it is a concern. It's also an inevitability in some cases, so you need to make sure that the community is positioned in a way that those who are there and want to stay there can do so.
A sculpture by Preston Jackson at the Bronzeville Center showed the cultural life of Bronzeville's past bursting out of the buildings and onto the streets and transit lines. As we rode the bus back into the center of Chicago, I felt exhilarated with the thought of that vibrant history bursting through the crust of this gray day and gray age. That culture came from the concentration of the community, a concentration that happened because of transit and walking. I got the feeling that that kind of excitement and creativity were coming back, led by rejuvenated transit lines and an emphasis on redeveloping the area's pedestrian-friendly infrastructure of traditional buildings with street-level retail and housing above. That recipe of pedestrian friendliness leading to stronger communities would be the emphasis of the third day of my Railvolution experience, which will be featured in the next episode of On Transit.